Hello everyone, Mrs. Keidel here. Today we will be doing some watercolor practice. This is to get us geared up for our watercolor project, which we will be planning over the next couple of days, and we will be doing 4 practice techniques today. So I'm going to go over what you need, what you will be doing, and once you are done with practice, if you have any extra time, then you can do some color mixing or any other kind of experimental watercoloring. So here we go. First things first, every person, as soon as you get your practice paper, which is located on the side counter, write your name. I'm using a Sharpie so everyone can see nicely, but you're going to have designated spots for your class on our drying racks, and it's important that your name is on there. Okay, once we get this practice going, it's going to be hard to tell whose is whose. In order to be ready, you will need to get from the sinks and the counter a water cup, a paintbrush, and a watercolor set. We have varying watercolor sets. We have a blue base, we have a black base watercolor set. We also have some random Prang or Crayola watercolors as well. So you'll pick whichever one you like the best. I want a variety of colors to experiment with, and you can see the tops of these are also areas where you can do some color mixing. So I'm going to use this one here that has a nice lid. You'll also, before you get started, need to grab a couple oil pastels, and just a few colors is all you need for this practice today. First, we will be doing wet on wet. Next, wet on dry. Thick and thin, which is all about line work, and oil pastel resist, which is to see how we can use mixed media within our pieces. So to get us started, what I like to do is hydrate my paints that I plan to be using. So I'm going to just get my water cup, get my paintbrush, and I'm going to start to apply some water into the colors that I believe I'll be using. You also should grab yourself a paper towel if you would like to dab dry in between colors. And then you can get started. For wet on wet, we want to take just water and apply it onto our paper first. It's okay to give a generous amount. You want your paint to glide and find that water to spread across the paper. I'm going to do a mixture of some blues and greens, and I'm going to start to add my color to the water, and you can experiment too with how you want to move that around. Maybe you want to really intentionally do some water separation where the paint and the water work together. However you want to do your wet on wet is up to you, but you're starting to experiment with and see how the water and those paints work together on your paper. As we move on to our next one, wet on dry, you're going to keep your paper as is, and you're going to possibly get all the excess water out of your brush. If you are like me on using this, you want to get started with that fresh, clean brush. And I'm going to go in with some of the same color scheme and see if I can kind of replicate what I've made. So this is giving some flower vibes. I'm just going to go with it and keep going with my wet on dry in the same colors. And you can see how they apply is very different. It's going to stay more in the select spot that you're placing it. You're not going to see as much blending. It's not going to move around quite as much. But that wet on dry look gives you just a little bit more control of what you're doing, and also allows you to go in and add some values so you can get more saturated paint on your brush and add that in to give a drop shadow, to do some color mixing, whatever you're feeling. Moving on to the next, we are doing thick and thin, and this is all about your brush and how you're using your brush. So to start off with our thin lines, be very gentle and just see how you can paint with just the very tip of that brush. Really practice your line work. Get those hands nice and strong as they're starting to use a paintbrush. And as you work along, push a little further down. Add a little more pressure to that brush and start to make thicker lines. And what you're going to start to see is that you have the control over the paint in this instance, and that you, just by adding different pressures, can create really different looks and really different line work. For our last practice today, we're moving into our oil pastel. And this is just to show you how this resist process works. So you could do light coloring with your oil pastel just to add a pop of color. You could push harder to get really bold lines and separation. Maybe you want to experiment with shapes or different textures. And what you'll do is then paint on top of those. And the resist process will happen right before your eyes as the paint goes around the oil pastel. Again, you can add more. You can have more saturated paint, get a more paint-filled brush, and do some blending. So it's going to be a little more purple once I add this blue to the pink. And you'll see here, within a fairly short period of time, we can practice wet on wet, wet on dry, thick and thin, and oil pastel resist. With your extra time, if you are done before cleanup, really start experimenting with your color mixing and see what kind of values that you can make. When we talk about our values, we have tints and shades. Tints when we add lighter colors, and shades when we add darker colors. So you can start to work on gradients, you can start to work on color themes, and as we are mixing and practicing today, thinking about what colors that you want to use as we begin planning. Now, as soon as we are ready for cleanup, it is important that everyone returns what they had back to the sink. You're going to leave your paint open and flat. You're going to clean your brush in your water cup. Return your brush, dump the water, and put your cup back. And any paper towels or other materials that you do not need can go into the rubbish bin or be put back to where they need to go. Please make sure that our sinks look just like we found them when we came into the room. And as you clean up, find your labeled class drying rack and make sure that name is on there. Have a great day, everyone. I will see you all tomorrow, and remember to stay Trojan true.